Hello, and welcome to Fighting Over the VCR. This is the podcast where my sister and I talk about movies that we grew up watching. This week, we're here in our studio getting ready to talk about two movies that we really, really like.
Debatable.
It's not debatable, but my name is Matthew.
I'm Nancy.
And a little later on in the show, we're going to talk about a great movie, my pick for this episode, Dazed and Confused. But first, we're going to talk about Nancy's pick, Beastmaster. Now, we are joined here pretty much because we're going to be talking about Beastmaster, but also because he's here with every episode. Our podcat, Mulder, he's here. You want to say hi, Mulder? He's being shy. Sit back and relax, and I'm going to hand the microphone over to Nancy so she can talk about her pick, Beastmaster.
Yeah, Beastmaster. Okay, so Beastmaster is a movie that came out in 1982, and the reason I picked this movie, before I get too far into what the movie was like and why we watched it so much, the thing is, we did watch it all the time. You know, we grew up with HBO, also known as, according to Dennis Miller, the Hey Beastmaster's on, or TBS, the Beastmaster station. We watched this movie a lot, and I honestly hadn't watched this movie in probably 25 plus years at least. So doing this Facebook challenge and coming up with movies that meant a lot to us as we were growing up also gave us the opportunity to revisit some of these movies. So I rewatched this movie not long ago, and I had to start this movie and restart it about 4 or 5 times because it's so slow in the beginning, and I kept falling asleep. Struggled through rewatching it. But then in thinking about wanting to talk about it today, I've decided I have to think about why I watched it so much as a kid and what about this movie was interesting to me as a child. And this movie is pretty scary. All the witchcraft and Rip Torn being this crazy cult leader, throwing kids into a fiery pit on top of a pyramid, and Mark Singer's character as a baby being transferred from his mother's belly to a cow, and the witches that have really, really distorted, weird faces, and just there's so much weird stuff about this movie, and it's so freaking violent. I mean, rewatching it and seeing how violent it is, it just kind of strikes me as so odd that we watched it so much. But I'm trying to think, okay, why did we watch this so much as kids? And there's actually a lot of humor in the movie. I think the fact that Mark Singer's character, his character's name is Dar, because he can talk to the animals.
Dar. Of the Emirites.
Yeah, Dar of the Emirites. Because of his relationship with the animals, how he's very playful with the ferrets and the panther, Rue, and of course the eagle, who I don't remember the eagle's name. I think the relationship with the animals became fascinating for us as kids. I think like, ooh, he's got this really neat power, and he is, and you know, that scene where he's trying to steal Kira's clothes and he's giving the panther these weird eye signals like, come on, dude, you gotta like make me look good here. I've got to be able to protect you from this fierce beast. It's like, oh my God. The movie, again, it's very violent and it's very strange, but you know, once you get to the second half, when he meets other people, when he meets John Amos's character, Seth, he reconnects with Kiri, the slave girl, and then turns out to be his younger brother. I think his name is Tall. Mm-hmm. And then the 4 of them together are trying to protect their city from the crazy cult leader, Max, and all those crazy guys. It does become more interesting, but wow. Really violent. And then like that weird army of zombies that are created where they put the nasty like neon green slug in the guy's ears to eat the brains, and then they like encase the body with armor. Those guys were so scary.
I've had what I would consider the opportunity to rewatch this movie. And you're crazy. This movie is great. Okay. First, Rip Torn's character is Mayax, not Max.
Okay, Mayax.
It's not X.
Like Aunt May.
It's
Axe.
Maax. Mayax. Mm-hmm. This probably could have ended up just being on my list, but
Probably should have been.
it probably should have been, because in hindsight, rewatching this movie, I connected with this movie so much still watching it. Okay, and to Nancy's credit here, it's difficult to watch only because some of the acting and some of the editing is not that great. Like, there's some overdubbing of dialogue that is clearly not done well, but you know, it's not a super high budget movie. We're not talking really high level cinema here. I would say that if I were to categorize this movie, it's kind of like a low budget Conan.
Clash of the Titans.
No. You be damned, you put it in the level of Clash of the Titans.
I think
this is more of like a low budget Conan the Barbarian.
Which I didn't watch Conan until an adult. I was an adult. I didn't see it when we were kids.
That's fair.
And it wasn't probably playing on HBO either.
Not as much.
No.
But I mean, I rewatched this movie to prepare for, this podcast, and I gotta say, I was really interested in watching this movie, from the creepy witches that I remembered creeping me out to kind of finally, like, as a kid, I didn't really understand the whole cult kind of aspect of it and the sacrificing the kids and everything like that. I just thought, like, oh, he's a bad guy, so he does bad things. Yeah. Rewatching it and, like, understanding that aspect of it just made the movie cooler to me. And I don't know what you're talking about. This movie is not slow. I mean, there is stuff that is interesting going on from the moment the credits finish rolling to the end of this movie. And I mean, you must have been...
I think I was really tired.
You must have been so tired watching this. Now, I watched this movie at night, and I was hooked. Yeah. And maybe I'm playing up this movie a little bit, but you know when you smell something, or you hear a weird sound, or you see something as a kid, and, like, memories just start flowing? That was me watching this movie. Like, just remembering all these scenes and watching it and being all excited. Yeah. And, like, there's a scene where he first meets the ferrets, Kodo and Podo, where they steal his clothes, run off, and then he like slips and slides down a hill into quicksand. Yes. That was my first experience seeing quicksand. Mm-hmm. And then he uses his powers to communicate with the animals to get the ferrets to try and save him and everything like that. I just remember, like, reenacting that as a kid, like playing and being like, oh, I gotta reach for the branch to get out, and stuff like that. Just little things like that. But I agree, this movie is scary. Like, I remember being really freaked out by the witches in this because they have, like, these distorted, almost mutilated faces. Yeah. And what they're doing is really creepy. I mean, the first 10 minutes of this movie where they they go to the tent of the king, do, like, their little, like, magic words kind of thing, and transfer the king's unborn son from the pregnant queen into the cow. Yeah. And then the way they keep them down is by pouring this glowing liquid over their neck to, like, hold them down. I mean, all this stuff,
it kills the queen, like it strangles her or something.
Well, I think the teleporting of the baby probably killed her. Yeah. And then they go to where she's in the woods with the baby with this blue fire that, to try and sacrifice him into the flame. And then, ultimately the baby is saved. Yeah. And then by, like, a farmer who finds baby Dar, then takes him as his own son. And that's kind of how he gets saved. And then we see Dar growing up and developing this way to communicate with the beasts. And then eventually, he's Mark Singer, and Mark Singer, he ends up being, like, the last of his the Emorites of his tribe.
But before he grows up to become Mark Singer, he's played by Billy Jacoby, who also played Buddy from Just One of the Guys.
Oh, yeah.
Which is another movie Matt and I watched a lot growing up.
Yes.
Anyways.
Yeah. Yeah,
kind
that
of a Corey Haim looking kid.
Yeah, that was another kind of raunch comedy kind of thing.
Could have been on either of our lists, honestly.
But in a way, with a very good message.
Just One of the Guys?
Yeah. I mean, because she goes undercover as a guy.
Let's not spoil that movie yet. We may talk about it in a future episode.
Anyway, then his whole village gets destroyed by... I can't believe you forgot to mention the Juns, who have this leader with this badass helmet with these horns on it, and he's got this cool weapon, and I mean, this is a testosterone-driven movie, and and as Nancy said, it is violent.
It's violent, and Matt is admonishing my comparison to Clash of the Titans, but it really did. I think one reason we were drawn to it maybe was because we watched Clash of the Titans. That the similar kind of, definitely set in a completely different time, and even with the little animal connection, because in Clash of the Titans, Perseus has the owl that he connects with and whatnot. But drawing on more recent comparisons, it's hard to think of this movie and not think a little bit of Game of Thrones.
I would definitely say,
especially like the pyramid imagery, and just the violence. I mean, the violence in general, and towards the end of the movie in Beastmaster, the village is protected by a tar moat. And that whole battle at the end where they bring down the gates and light the tar on fire, that seems like something that could happen in Game of Thrones.
There's light level nudity in Beastmaster.
Of course.
So Game of Thrones, and there you go.
Yeah.
I didn't think you were thinking of that when.
Well, I mean, but another thing I realized, thinking of the humor. I mean, the humor in this movie is kind of odd. The random things that they start giggling at and laughing at. But I was thinking about my nephew, who, when he sees grown-ups laughing, he starts laughing because he realizes, oh my God, something must be really funny. So I think as a kid watching this and watching the grown-ups in this movie start cracking up over, oh hey, we just chopped the rope off of this boat and now we're gonna float out and the bad guys can't get us, and they start all laughing. I think we all probably thought, oh yeah, they're laughing, so that's funny. So I think they maybe oversold some of the humor just to maybe capture some of the youth. I don't know. Again, the movie was on all the time, so it was hard not to watch it. I think most people our age that had HBO or TBS had to have seen this movie at least 10 times as kids.
Yeah, I mean, we jokingly within our household used to say HBO was Hey Beastmaster's on and TBS was the Beastmaster station. And then if you go online and do some research about this movie, other people had the exact same term for this for those stations because of this movie. Yeah. The animals.
The animals are amazing. And I have to say, when he has the eagle vision, or is it an eagle?
All the animals, where he was looking through animals' eyes.
I feel like it's like a really cool Instagram filter. The way it has kind of the blurred edging that looks like the shape of an eyeball. It's got this feel, and the music is good. The music has almost like a John Williams-esque kind of score. There's definitely things that are catchy about it, and if you as a listener have never watched Beastmaster, maybe dive in and try it out, knowing that it might appear really campy. Yeah. But also it is very violent. The villains in it are a little unusual. Like Matt said, the Juns have this very interesting kind of headdress, and they're human, but they don't look human. And neither do the army of zombies that have the blue slug, the green slug that's put in their ears to eat up their brains or whatever that is. I mean, but there is a scene. The first time we really see Mayax sacrificing children at the top of this pyramid, after he throws a kid in the pyramid and the eagle comes in and saves the child because Dar has kind of influenced him to come down and do that. After the kid has been, flown away to safety, watching Mayax as this crazy cult guy try to spin it so that, oh, see, the god, he wants you to take their children. I mean, just it's so interesting to watch current cults of personality that try to always flip the script to suit their needs. We saw that back in the day with this movie. I mean, this guy was just such a fanatic. And it just, that part was actually probably the most impressive thing about this movie to me in a rewatch, was just seeing how insane Rip Torn's character was.
Yeah, he was pretty crazy. And I don't think as kids watching this movie, we really kind of connected with that.
Other than he was scary. I mean, he was scary.
I mean, he's got like these braids, like these little small braids coming down the side of his head, the side, like where his sideburns would be, with like these skull, like little things at the end, these little skulls at the end. I mean, there's the imagery. I don't know. The imagery in this movie is simple, but very. It almost seems very real.
Yeah.
Now, and I think that one of the reasons why, like we were talking a little bit, like you had mentioned Clash of the Titans, which is a movie we grew up with watching, and I still really like that original.
Me too. I think
Clash
it holds up very well.
I think that's a really good movie. And I would also say that, of those like early, in even mid to late 80s, like fantasy movies, this movie is not necessarily on the par of Clash of the Titans. There's another movie that we watched all the time that I still really like, called Dragon Slayer.
Oh, yeah.
That movie is great. And I wouldn't say that this movie is at maybe that level either. But it's a fun movie to watch. And I really enjoyed the rewatch. And, you've got these animals. You've got the ferrets, Kodo and Podo.
Yes.
You've got the eagle, whose name I can't remember, but I don't even remember him actually giving him a name. And then you've got you said panther, Rue.
Yeah.
But I was doing my research, and they actually took a tiger and had Black Clairol dye and dyed the tiger black. Yeah. And when you look at it, it looks like a tiger. And hearing that they did that is just like so like disheartening to me. I was I felt so bad for this tiger, and it didn't harm the tiger. Yeah. I read about it, and it didn't harm the tiger. It's just, and in fact, it ended up being more trouble than it was worth, because the dye would very easily come off. So it would always come off around its mouth. So they had to keep on touching it up like the whole time. And the production on this movie probably wasn't very high, and I believe what I had read was they had said that when they talked to animal trainers, that getting a panther to actually do what you want it to is a lot more difficult than getting a tiger to do what you want it to do.
I heard that too.
And seeing the animals as kids, I mean, I remember like after watching this movie, we had a dog we had two dogs growing up. We had one when we were really little, and then he passed away, and then we had another dog. But I remember, like, any time around our dog or going to other animals, looking into their eyes, like, thinking, like, I can control you. Yeah. Do what I'm thinking. And then they would bark, and I'm like, did I just make you bark? Yeah. Stuff like that. And that was the fantasy movie playing into our imagination. And I just really, watching this movie, remember doing that as a kid. Yeah. And I was like, man, this movie really affected me.
Well, and one of our uncles had a ferret named Piranha. And to be able to see a ferret, that our uncle actually had a ferret as a pet, was also somewhat exotic. And to kind of connect his exotic pet ferret to the movie was always kind of fun.
Well, the only other things that I wanted to mention is, Mark Singer as Dar didn't really, as far as I know, go on to doing a whole lot else.
He played a blind guy in a movie, and the only scene I remember from that movie is when his stepdaughter falls into the pool, and he has to figure out that she's fallen in the pool, and he has to rescue her. I remember seeing that, and I think it came out the same year as Beastmaster, which was 1982.
Right.
Yeah, he didn't do a whole lot. His sister, Lori Singer, who actually looks a lot like him, did a lot more. She was in Footloose.
Oh.
She played the main
character.
Kevin Bacon's love interest, Ariel.
No, I did not know that.
And if you think about it, they look almost exactly the same.
Well, and you know what? That's another thing about Mark Singer is I remember, if you've listened to our podcast before, one of the movies that I talk about liking is Star Wars. And there's kind of I remember as like a kid, like somehow equating like Mark Singer to like just a more buff Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
Probably because of hair color and similar haircut.
Yeah.
I remember thinking of that connection.
Would you say that Beastmaster could have possibly influenced the creation of He-Man?
Definitely. I mean,
They look alike.
Well, and if I go
He-Man.
back into my memory here, I think He-Man came out before Beastmaster. Beastmaster came out in 82, and He-Man was like maybe right around that time. I'm sure someone can send us a comment with, correcting us. The Black Tiger-Roo is so much like not Battle Cat, but the bad guy cat, Skeletor's cat, whose name I can't remember at this moment. That, yeah, I would definitely say there's some sort of influence there.
Well, I think Beastmaster was based on a novel, so the novel could have possibly predated He-Man as well.
And then going back to the cast, Kiri was played by Tanya Roberts, and her role in Beastmaster is what got her role in the James Bond film A View to a Kill.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, I think, Roger Moore's last James Bond, and probably one of my favorites.
I like that movie a lot.
Christopher Walken is the villain in that.
And it's set in the Silicon Valley.
That's right. And that is another movie that we probably watched a ton.
Yeah. And it had Duran Duran got to do the theme for that movie. Also important is that Tanya Roberts played Donna's mom in that 70s show, which ties her to our Dazed and Confused conversation, which will be coming up shortly.
And then Rip Torn as Mayax, he's creepy in that.
They did a lot of profile shots on him to, I think, accentuate. He has a very unique nose, which kind of makes him look even more evil and scary.
And if anyone there is not familiar with Rip Torn, probably one of the other movies that a lot of people nowadays probably know him as is from the movie Dodgeball.
Yeah.
He plays the coach that is in the wheelchair, and that's a fun movie.
If you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball.
That's right. If you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball. Probably the character, the actor that, a lot of people know is John Amos as Seth. He went on to be in Coming to America as Mr. McDowell.
Oh, that's right.
Wasn't
he in Good Times?
Yes, he was the dad in Good Times. It's kind of a small movie, and Nancy put this on her list, and I was really kind of surprised and kind of happy about it because I think that I had a lot of fun watching this movie.
I think I put it on mostly because I thought it would be very interesting to revisit it, and it has been. I mean, again, it certainly isn't my favorite movie of all the movies I put on my list, but I'm glad that we had a chance to talk about it because we did watch it a lot, and I wanted to hear what Matt had to say about it, and I'm actually excited that he liked it as much as he did.
I liked it a lot, rewatching it, and in case you start going down a Beastmaster rabbit hole, they did make sequels to this that are not good.
Don't worry, I wasn't planning on it.
In Beastmaster 2, he finds some sort of time portal and gets teleported to modern day, which just seems ridiculous.
It is.
And then they also made a television series,
wow.
Which I did not watch, and maybe now I will. Maybe I'll find some sort of internet hole where I can, dig that up and check that out when I have totally free time, which is never.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, well, I think that's about all we have to say about Beastmaster because we have a very, very different movie to talk about that Matt selected.
Yes. So, in the early to mid 90s, Nancy and I went to the movie theater and actually saw this movie together, I think.
Yeah.
and we saw this great movie called Dazed and Confused. This movie has become iconic for so many reasons. They've come out with Criterion collections of this movie.
The soundtrack alone, if you've never really had a good compilation of 70s classic rock, just buy this soundtrack.
Yeah.
In fact, 1/6 of the budget was spent on getting the licensing rights for this soundtrack.
Yeah, so let's talk about this movie. This movie is amazing. I watch this movie probably at least once a year, and my wife and I love this movie. We connect over this movie. We quote this movie. It's a great movie. This was, I believe, the second movie directed and written by Richard Linklater, who has gone on to do another movie that most recently that I really like called Boyhood.
Which is something Matt and I did see in the theater together also.
We did.
Yep.
We did. It takes place in Texas on May 28th, 1976. And it is the last day of school.
Let me point out before we go any further, you would only know it's Texas if they tell you, because other than Matthew McConaughey with his natural-born Texas accent, no one else even bothers to have a Texas accent in this movie.
True, but
Which
they do mention
is
that
kind of annoying.
they do mention that they at some point in the movie they mention they're going to drive to Houston to go get Aerosmith tickets.
They do, but they probably could have made a better effort to have some kind of a Texas accent.
Remember having to go to a venue to buy tickets? Remember how to go? I mean,
Yeah.
And we didn't have to go to the venue. We could go to like the warehouse or
Yeah.
Rayleigh's and get tickets, but no,
Yeah.
can't do that anymore. This movie's kind of done in a very kind of normal style that Richard Linklater kind of works in, where he kind of focuses on like a day in the life kind of thing, and basically it's the last day of school, and the focus of this movie is on the now, junior class becoming the now senior class and the new incoming freshmen and how the relationship is there. We don't ever see any of the graduating class or the graduating seniors. We really only focus on mainly the new senior class and the freshman class.
And can I point out that this movie came out in September of my senior year and your freshman year of high school.
That is right.
So we were the exact ages of the older sister and younger brother that are in this movie.
Right. So they're focusing on this day, and really everything kind of revolves around one main character and then how he connects with with various characters throughout the movie. His name is Randall Pink Floyd, but he's referred to throughout the movie as Pink, and he's played by Jason London, not Jeremy London from Mallrats, but Jason London, Jeremy's twin brother. They are identical. And he is the high school quarterback, and he's kind of what we used to call in high school a floater, where like he didn't have one group of friends. He was kind of friends with everybody. He had friends in his poker night, his poker table circle, which were kind of like the nerdy, not really social group. He had his circle of football players that from his team. Then there was all the girls that they hung out with who dated the football players. And then throughout the movie, he kind of makes this connection with one of the incoming freshmen. What kind of starts off this movie is this whole kind of tradition at this high school where the seniors haze the new freshmen. And, this is fairly common, throughout high school lore from probably when high school was invented till now. There's some sort of hazing that goes on. One of the things that happens in this movie is the senior boys will make these paddles and then hunt down the incoming freshmen, and all through summer, give them licks on the butt with these paddles. And it's pretty barbaric and premature, and Nancy is giving this look like this is the most ridiculous thing ever.
It's like 40% of the movie is the hazing, and I hate it.
Well, I think that Linklater is just trying to he's trying to capture what life was like probably around the time he was in high school,
I guess.
So, and then the senior girls haze the freshman girls by basically humiliating them by putting, condiments on them and making them propose to other guys, and just it's pretty terrible. He's just trying to capture this kind of high school moment.
The only good thing about what happens with the girls being hazed is that there's one girl who ends up having a connection with one of the senior boys, Anthony Rapp's character. They seem to form a little bond, and they connect through the whole movie, and that was good. I didn't mind that part, but just Parker Posey playing like the queen bitch in this group was just, I mean, couldn't have been more typecast for her. She was perfect as it, it's just so torturous.
Well, and this was the movie that really broke Parker Posey.
Yeah.
And she ended up becoming, indie queen, for so long because of this movie. As the movie, after the hazing goes on, they're all kind of getting ready to have this, go to this big party at this guy's house. And then it turns out that his parents, who were going to go out of town, don't go out of town because he orders kegs of beer, and the guy goes to deliver the beer too early, and the parents are there, and the party gets blown.
Yeah.
So instead of going to the party, they all kind of get together and decide to hang out afterwards at the local kind of teenage hangout, the Emporium, which is like an arcade, and it's got pool tables and stuff. Then the movie kind of is concluded where they all have this huge party at what they call the Moon Tower, which is this area in like the woods where they all get together and hang out. And it's really kind of got this pacing of kind of a day in the life, almost like you are an observer, not just a viewer of a movie, but like almost like you're standing around watching this stuff go on. And the way he directs this movie makes you really, and with the music and the vibe that he's creating and how great the costumes are and everything, you really almost kind of feel like you're hanging out at the Emporium with them.
Or that you go to school with them.
Or you go to school with them. Now, if you look at the cast of this movie, there's a lot of well-named people in this movie, and there's a lot of people that didn't really go on to doing anything that is too known. Probably the biggest names in this movie, we already mentioned Parker Posey. Ben Affleck is in this movie. He plays a character named O'Bannon, who is
the biggest dickwad in the whole movie.
He is a senior who flunked senior year and has to repeat it. So he gets to do all this hazing for like a second year in a row. And yes, he is a major dick. And I believe around the same time or before, he had been in other movies. I think was he in School Ties?
I think so, yeah.
He had done some other work. This movie, he really kind of stands out, as this kind of real jerk character. The other huge name to come out of this is Matthew McConaughey. And this is the quintessential, I mean, if you've ever heard him say, all right, this is where that's from.
And last week, we talked about Gene Wilder having an amazing entrance into a movie. Matthew McConaughey almost tops it with this movie. I mean, him walking into the Emporium in his salmon-colored jeans and his Bob Marley T-shirt.
Just the cigarettes rolled up in his sleeve.
He is so cool walking through the Emporium with, Mitch, the incoming freshman, on one side and Pink on the other side. He just owns that scene. It is so awesome. He's, in my opinion, he's the best character in this movie, and he certainly doesn't have the most screen time, but he has the most memorable lines by far. He has
lines like, "Hey man, do you have a joint? No? It would be a lot cooler if you did."
Yeah.
Or "That's what I like about those high school girls. I get older, they stay the same age."
Yeah, I mean, he is just so cool. He's super creepy, but I like him a lot.
Yeah,
he for me is the reason I would rewatch this movie.
And he's not one of the seniors. He has graduated. He's older than all of them. He works, but he still hangs out with them because they're friends. He was a football player just like they are football players. Yeah, so he is definitely like one of the standouts. A couple other people who had some success. Rory Cochrane played Slater. He was later in a movie called Empire Records, and then he was on, I believe, one of those crime shows. think it was either CSI or Bones or one of those. He was on that. And then Adam Goldberg, who played Mike, he went on to being the famous roommate of Chandler on Friends, who dehydrated the food, and that was when Chandler and Joey got in like a fight, and he got a new roommate, and but
he's been in a ton of stuff. He's really great.
I think one of the reasons why I picked this movie, other than it being incredibly entertaining, and the soundtrack is amazing. I mean, it has
top notch.
It has my favorite ZZ Top song in it, Tush. It's got Alice Cooper. It's got The Runaways. It's got Aerosmith. It has
Foghat.
I can't really tolerate him in life, but it's got Ted Nugent Stranglehold.
You know what, Matt? When I realized that song was Ted Nugent, I almost got mad.
Well,
when I was listening to it, I was like, oh, this song is so good.
Yeah.
And it's Ted Nugent.
Yeah. Well,
it's okay.
You know what?
It's perfect for the movie.
It kind of, my feeling about Ted Nugent's music and Ted Nugent the person is probably how I have to feel about most musicians or maybe people who have made movies where, you know, you might like their character, you might like what the art that they made, but they might not be the greatest person in the world or a person that we would be friends with. Yeah. So that's just how it is. One of the, you know, besides getting to see this movie, you know, I was a freshman coming into high school. Nancy was a senior. We went and saw this movie together. That's all great. But I remember thinking, like, man, if only high school could be this cool.
Oh, because you wanted to get beaten up every day by mean seniors?
No, I think it was like the vibe. Like how, like this concept that one of the main characters, Mitch, who is an incoming freshman.
Who looks like Tim Lincecum.
Yes, and you know, he ends up having like probably one of the like this whole kind of evolving kind of thing where he is playing Little League and he has this Little League game at the beginning of the movie, and he's freaking out the entire game because the seniors are on the other side of the fence waiting for him to beat the crap out of him with their paddles.
Yeah.
And then by the end of the movie, because Pink kind of is like, hey, man, do you need a ride home after they all kind of beat him up? Mm-hmm. He takes him home. He says, put some ice on it. I got it really bad when I was a kid, when I was your age. Don't worry about it. And then he invites him to their big party.
Yeah.
And this kind of, you know, being able to do that, and then this kid ends up getting wasted and hooking up with some sophomore and everything like that. Not that I got to do any of these things, but it was kind of like, hey, man, I'm going into high school. This is, you know, let's think positive about high school and like live it up. You know, and I got to
keep living.
Just keep living. LIVIN.
Yeah.
You know, and that was, and I think that's kind of, I remember like going to school the next day and like teachers are like, hey, how's it going? We're like, I saw the best movie last night. And they're like, what movie? Dazed and Confused. And they were like, why? Why would you see this movie? And I was like, you don't even know. Go see this movie. There's a lot of really iconic scenes in this movie, and there's a lot of stuff that happens in this movie that, I didn't really partake in, or maybe if, like, in hindsight, if I, you know, wasn't so focused on academics, then maybe I probably would have had fun. But then I think about it, and I'm like, I did a lot of fun shit when I was a kid. I got to go to concerts. I hung out with a lot of different friends. And, you know, maybe I wasn't living the small town high school life, but I got to do a lot of stuff. And people I went to high school with could be like, man, you were not as cool as any of those people. But it was fun. And I really kind of felt like this movie was fun to watch every time I turned it on. And I liked it. And hey, Wooderson, played by Matthew McConaughey, you know, he says, I love those redheads. And, you know, I can relate.
You married one.
I married one. So, you know, I think that the small town experience that you see in this movie is probably, it's different than what we went through because, you know, our town wasn't huge, but it had 3 high schools. I mean, or 4 if you count the private school, and 5 if you count the continuation school. So 5 because we have to count those. I'm sure for a lot of people, even now, if you live in a small town, the way high school is in this movie is probably still the same. Maybe with less hazing, but the small town feel, the small town feel where everyone kind of knows everybody, and you've got old people going up to the quarterback and being like, "Hey, how are we doing this year?" Because high school football is the main attraction for a small town, in modern day America.
Yeah.
This movie kind of really, it might encapsulate, 1976 in this town in Texas, but it really is more iconic for a lot of, small town America.
I think people who've never seen this movie that are watching it now, especially if they're in their 20s or younger, because of the way bullying has been focused on in the last 10, 20 years, I think they would see the hazing in a very different way. I think there'd be a sensitivity towards it or a big giant eye roll to it. Like, how could you get away with doing this? I
really think that the hazing part of this movie must have really, really felt like
it bothered me.
It really must have really bothered you, and because you seem
it's not funny to me at all.
It's not funny, and it's not something that I would condone or anything like that. I mean, I understand why it's happening, and it doesn't mean I want it to happen.
I mean, ultimately,
I almost feel like you can't, that made this movie hard to watch for you.
It did a little bit. I mean, I hadn't seen this movie in probably at least 10 years. I mean, I've listened to the soundtrack a million times, but I hadn't seen it in a long time. And really, I think because Ben Affleck's character gets his just desserts in this, it kind of answers the whole, this is the consequence of being a big giant dick and trying to enact this kind of hazing on a kid. And that Mitch was able to hook up with the girl and kind of win. He got through it. And one of the other girls that was hazed, she and Anthony Rapp, formed a bond, and they seemed to get through it. But yeah, I mean, I don't take a lot of pleasure in watching people torture other people. Yeah. And, especially bratty high school, especially under the premise that it's just the custom. It's just what we do. And
I understand.
I certainly didn't haze anybody when I was a senior.
No. And I didn't either, and I never really felt like I ever got hazed either, but again, we grew up in a different area, in a different time.
Yeah.
But
this movie is still a lot of fun. I'm not going to discount that this movie was a lot of fun. It was fun to see it at the time. And again, reliving it, and especially Matthew McConaughey. He's just so cool. And this was his first role. He wasn't supposed to act in this movie. He was on this movie in the crew. And then so I'm assuming Richard Linklater kind of encouraged him, well, why don't you test out to be in the movie?
And then he said, all right, all right, all right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So there's a lot of fun characters in this movie. One of them is Slater, who, if you've seen this movie, he's the guy with his hat backwards with the long hair who's getting high all the time. But he has some moments in this where he just says the funniest shit ever. He
drove me crazy.
Oh my God. He has this amazing monologue where he's talking about how this country was built on weed, and how George Washington harvested weed, and how Martha...
Was it George or was it Thomas Jefferson?
No, it was George Washington, because he's on the $1 bill, which is... Have you noticed? It's green, too. It's green too, and how Martha Washington was a hip lady, man, and how she would he'd be coming home and she would have the bushels of it for him and everything like that. I mean, this movie. Oh man, so there's some wisdom from Slater in this movie that is just great. There's another actress who's in this that really went on to do a lot, and that's Mia Jovovich, who went on to do all the Resident Evil movies. And in this, she plays kind of an artsy kind of girl.
She has a really small part.
She has a really small part. They do this great thing where they steal statues from the high school and paint the faces with Kiss makeup, which I'm not a huge fan of Kiss, but
it's funny.
That is funny and amazing. And then there is, back to one of Pink's other groups, which is the Poker Table, which is more of the antisocial, more nerdy kids who there's Cynthia the redhead who Matthew McConaughey hooks up with. There's Adam Goldberg, who plays Mike.
Yeah.
And then there's Anthony Rapp, who plays Tony. And Anthony Rapp went on to actually be in the play and then movie Rent. The three of them kind of they're riding in the car together, and they're really antisocial. And they decide, hey, we're going to go to this party, and it's not normally their thing to do, but Mike is like, no, we gotta live, we gotta do stuff. I'm tired of being at the poker table, and maybe we should all be doing this. And Cynthia is like, yeah, let's do it. And Tony's like, I don't know. And Tony ends up hooking up with one of the freshman girls. Mike is like, he's in the back of the car and they're driving around. He's like, I don't want to go to law school anymore. I don't want to live my life as expected. And then everyone's like, well, what do you want to do? And he just has this great line, and I love it. He goes, I want to dance. And just this, I crack up every time I hear this, and it's so ridiculous. But I love this kind of idea that, he doesn't want to go, live by the grain that he feels like high school has formed him into living.
Be a nonconformist.
To be a nonconformist. And just before I get to a little game we're going to play, the last point I want to make is I really like near the end of the movie, right before they decide, it's the next morning and they're going to go get their Aerosmith tickets. They're on the football field, and it's Pink and Wooderson and
the guy with the crazy eyebrows?
The guy with the crazy eyebrows, who I don't think did anything. That's Dawn. And then their girlfriends, they're on the football field, and they're discussing this thing that all the coaches want all the football players to sign this agreement that they're not going to do drugs, that they're not going to party, and basically be kids. Mm-hmm. And they all have to sign this agreement. And the whole movie, Pink is like, I don't want to sign this. And all of his football buddies are like, no, man, I mean, forget about it. Just sign it and, just live your life, but don't worry about it. Just sign it. And the whole time he's like, by principle, I do not want to do this. Eventually he tells the football coach, maybe I might play football, but I am not signing that. But before he does that, he has this great line where, they're talking about high school and all the advantages they have because they're football players and how great it is and everything. And he says, if these are the best years of my life, remind me to kill myself. Because he is just like, I don't want this to be what defines me. Mm-hmm. And I really thought about that, and I took that to heart even as a kid. This is just high school, and yeah, there's a lot of very important things that happen in high school. And a lot of what you do in high school can kind of shape what college you go to, maybe where you might be in life. But you're only 18 and you're so young and you have so much life to live in after that. And I know for a lot of people, for some people, high school might be the peak,
highlight.
The highlight. And there's nothing wrong with that if people are happy and living good lives, great. But I didn't want that for me. And really kind of spoke to me, as a kid. So we've talked about the movie, and we've talked about a lot of people in the movie, so we're going to play a little game.
Okay.
It's called Which Character Do you think you were in high school, and which character do you think you are now?
I don't know enough about the characters in this movie.
Really?
The girls, really. I mean, I guess technically the one I would probably be the most like is the older sister to the younger brother, simply because you and I were that same, that was us. Mm-hmm. But no, I don't know.
You don't know?
Who were you then and who are you now?
I think if I were to really think about it, because I did think about it because I prepared for this and I made up this game, I'm probably closest to being Tony, the blonde guy who hooks up with the freshman girl.
Anthony Rapp's
character, minus the hooking up with the freshman girl. Just because, I think now I'd probably be a little more analytical and a little more hesitant to kind of just go with the flow and join in with what everybody's doing. And that's the character I would think that I would identify with the most. But then again, I'm that's me. I don't know. I mean, some people might think I might be, the guy who starts the fight with Mike. I don't know.
I'm going to actually argue, I don't think that the girls had nearly the kind of character development that the boys did in the movie. So I don't think it's even a good question for me to even answer as based on the female characters in the movie.
Yeah, because you definitely were not Parker Posey's character. You weren't Darla.
No.
And you weren't
Simone, which is Pink's girlfriend. I don't think the girls had nearly the amount of attention in this movie as the guys did. But then again, this is Richard Linklater's movie, so I can see him having more interest in kind of focusing on the guys. And since the movie does kind of focus on the partying that happens on the last day of school, I think that kind of energy has a more masculine energy anyways.
Probably.
So
if anyone out there who has seen this movie wants to play along,
tell us who you think you are.
Tell us who you think you might be. Leave a comment, communicate with us somehow, and maybe we'll talk about it later. So I think that's a wrap. I had a lot of fun rewatching these two movies.
Me too.
I think I had more fun rewatching these movies than Nancy did.
Actually, because I hadn't seen either of them in a really long time, I'm glad that we had both of these movies for this week. I think it was really interesting.
Don't forget to rate us and on whatever podcast platform you are using. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook and on Twitter. And lastly, again, I'd like to ask anyone out there who possibly has a connection to anyone in the circle of John and Joan Cusack. I'm just throwing it out there. Mulder here really wants to meet him. Nancy and I want to meet him and talk about what movies they grew up watching and what made them want to get into the movie industry. So, yeah. So, thank you very much for listening. I'm Matthew.
I'm Nancy.
And this is Mulder, signing off.